You know that scary name you always hear in the news, especially after a big storm? Flesh-eating bacteria? It sounds like something straight out of a horror movie. Well, today we're gonna pull back that curtain of fear and look at the real science behind the sensational headlines. I'm sure you've seen it. The headlines are designed to grab your attention, right? But what is this thing really? How much of that fear is based on fact, and how much is just, well, fiction? Let's figure it out. Okay, so first things first, let's just drop that scary nickname for a second. To really get a handle on the threat, we need to start using its proper name and understand what we're actually up against. The real name for this condition is Whitmore's disease, or if you want to get technical, Melioidosis. It's a really serious infectious disease, and it's all caused by one specific culprit, a bacterium called Burkholderia pseudomallei. That's the name to remember. And here's the wild part, this isn't some brand new superbug that just appeared out of nowhere. No way. It's been known to science for over 100 years. It's better to think of it as a forgotten disease, one that just kind of hangs out in the environment, waiting for the right conditions to make a comeback. So, if we're going to understand the disease, we got to get to know the bug itself, right? Where does this hidden enemy actually live, and how does it do what it does? And where does it live? Well, the answer is kind of mundane, actually. It lives in soil, in mud, and in standing water. And this is so important to understand. You don't catch this from another person. The threat comes directly from our environment. And like I said, this bug has been around for a long time. It was first discovered way back in 1911. By 1936, it was already documented in Vietnam, and today it's considered endemic, which just means it's always present, in places like Southeast Asia and Northern Australia. Okay, and this is where it gets really serious. This is why we're talking about it. When this bacteria causes an infection, things can go downhill fast. Without the right treatment, and I mean right away, it can lead to death in as little as 48 hours after someone gets to the hospital. It's incredibly aggressive. So we know where it lives, and we know it's incredibly dangerous. The big question then is, who's actually at risk? And how does it make that leap from the mud into a person's body? Now, technically, anyone could get infected, but the experts are really clear about who's in the high-risk zone. We're talking about farmers and other workers who are constantly in contact with soil and water. But it also includes people whose bodies just can't fight off infections as well. So folks with weakened immune systems, people with chronic illnesses like diabetes or lung disease, and the elderly. So how does it actually get from the mud into your body? Well, the paths are pretty direct. The number one way is through broken skin. A simple cut or a scrape that comes into contact with contaminated soil or water is the most common route. You could also get it by breathing in contaminated dust, and sometimes, though it's less common, by eating or drinking something that's contaminated. Alright, this next part is super important, because we need to bust a huge myth. Can you catch Whitmore's disease from another person, like a cold or the flu? The answer is a clear and simple no. It is not contagious between people. The risk comes from the environment, period. So when should you be most on guard? Well, there's a definite peak season for infections. It lines up perfectly with the rainy season, usually from July to November. That's when there's more mud and more standing water, which just ups the chances of exposure. Knowing how it spreads is half the battle. The other half, recognizing the signs. So let's talk about the body's alarm bells, the things you need to look out for. So after he's been exposed, symptoms don't always pop up right away. Typically, you'll see something within about 1 to 21 days. But, and this is what makes it so tricky, the bacteria can sometimes just hang out in the body, dormant, for a really long time without causing any symptoms at all. One of the trickiest things about Whitmore's is that its symptoms can look like a ton of other illnesses. That's why some doctors call it the great mimicker. As you can see here, what you feel really depends on where the infection decides to set up shop. If it's localized, you might just get a skin ulcer or an abscess. If it gets into your lungs, it can feel just like pneumonia. And if it hits your bloodstream or goes widespread, well then you're looking at really severe symptoms like high fever, trouble breathing, and even seizures. Okay, so with a disease that's this nasty and hard to spot, prevention is absolutely everything. So let's shift gears and talk about the most important part of all this, your action plan to stay safe. And this right here, this is probably the single most important thing you need to remember. There is no vaccine for Whitmore's disease. You heard that right. No shot you can get. That means the only real defense we have is taking personal protective measures. The power to stay safe is literally in your hands. So what can you actually do? Well, the good news is the steps are pretty straightforward, but you have to be consistent. If you're gardening, farming, or wading through floodwater, wear waterproof boots and gloves. Got an open cut? It is crucial that you keep it away from soil and standing water. At the very least, cover it up with a waterproof bandage. Good hygiene, like washing your hands and feet thoroughly, is a must. It's all about creating a simple barrier between you and the places this bacteria calls home. Alright, so prevention is definitely our #1 weapon. But what if, despite all the precautions, you think you might be infected? This is when acting fast isn't just a good idea, it can be the difference between life and death. You have to understand, treating this is no joke. It's a long, tough road, because this bacteria is naturally resistant to a lot of common antibiotics. Doctors have to use a 2-phase attack. It starts with an intense round of IV antibiotics in the hospital, just to get the infection under control and save the person's life. After that, there's a long maintenance phase, sometimes for months, of oral antibiotics to hunt down and kill any leftover bacteria. So what's the bottom line here? It's simple, really. If you're in a high-risk group and you start feeling sick after being around soil or muddy water, you need to get to a doctor. Immediately. Do not wait to see if it gets better. With how fast this disease can move, getting diagnosed and treated early is everything. So there you have it. We've pulled back the curtain on the so-called flesh-eating bacteria. It's not some monster from a movie, it's a real environmental threat. It's serious, yes, but it's also preventable. So that leaves us with one last question. Now that you know where the danger is hiding, what are you going to do to make sure it stays there?